Hello students, in this video lecture we are going to discuss the second part of the inter-process communication covering the message passing technique. In the previous video lecture we discussed about the basics of inter-process communication and the shared memory based implementation. Now we are going to focus on the other option, which is message passing based inter-process communication. So shared memory is a technique that is applicable and useful only when the processors share a region of memory. So only if there is a memory being shared by the processors, we can implement shared memory based inter-process communication. But in another way to achieve the same effect is for the operating system is to provide the mechanism by which the process can interact. Shared memory is a technique where the processors have full control on the usage of the memory. The OS only facilitates the creation of the shared memory. In other words, the OS gives permission for the processors to share their memory, and the actual sharing of communication is sending of messages is all taken care by the communicating processes or the concurrent processes. OS plays a very little role in that. But message passing is a communication technique where the OS offers the complete package of all the techniques needed for the communication, and it also provides the synchronization. Message passing having an advantage that even synchronization is already employed in the message passing, whereas in shared memory the synchronization is an additional task. So that has to be incorporated by using some synchronization technique like a semaphore or monitor. But in message passing, it is it is inherent, it is built in. The synchronization need not be explicitly defined separately. Message passing provides, as I told you, message passing allows both communication to take place and also the processors to synchronize among themselves in sharing the address space. It is particularly useful in environments like distributed systems where the processors does not reside on the or run on the same CPU. They are running on multiple CPUs. So when processes are running in different computers, they are not going to be sharing the memory. So the option of shared memory is ruled out. Then the only option left is implementing a message passing system through which they can send and receive messages between themselves. So message passing works in any environment, whether it is a single system having many processes or many systems or many computers running different processes. In any case, message passing will work, but shared memory is only limited to a computer which runs multiple processes. All our applications like the internet chat programs, WhatsApp, Facebook, chats. So all the chat applications are basically message passing implementations. Now the operations involved in the message passing. There are two operations needed for implementing the message passing. One is the send function. So there should be a send function through which a message can be forwarded. Similarly, there is a receive function through which the message can be received or fetched. We have some variations in the implementation of the message passing. So we will look at some of the various options we have. One is about whether we want to deal with fixed sized messages or variable sized messages. Both are available. It is a matter of our preference which one to implement. If you go for the fixed sized implementation, then the advantage is it's going to be a simple implementation, because you know what is the maximum size of a message. So you can implement the entire messaging system expecting that the messages will not exceed this particular size. So that is an advantage. But the drawback is that it puts a limit on the programmer. So when the programmer is developing the application, if he has to send a larger message, then he may have to break it into multiple smaller messages and sequence them, and the receiver should also receive all the pieces of the message in the same sequence and should be able to combine them to make it into a original message. This is all, this complexity is left to the programmer if the messages are not allowed to be of variable size. On the other hand, making the messages to be variable size makes the implementation complicated. Like you have to ensure you have to implement the message system expecting any size of any message, and there are several methods for implementing the send receive operations. Again, we are looking at some options. Option 1 is it can be direct or indirect communication. It can be synchronous or asynchronous communication. It can be automatic or explicit buffering. So we will explore each one of the option and see the merits and demerits. First, if you take a direct communication, the idea of direct communication is that processors name the other processes. So if process A wants to send a message to process B, it will mention the ID of the process. We know that every process is definitely given a unique ID. So PID is there for each and every process. So there won't be any confusion on identity. So the process which is sending a message must know the ID of the receiver, and it must be mentioned in the message clearly so that it will be delivered to the exact destination or the receiver. This is the idea of direct communication. You must mention the process ID along with the actual message. In the same way, receiver will also have to mention the sender who is which it is expecting a message from. So the address of the sender also should be known to the receiver. Now in that case, if you implement a direct communication, then the communication link can have these properties. Number 1, links are established automatically based on the address. So once you specify the address, that is once the sender specifies an address and receiver also specifies the address, a communication line can be easily established, very much like we make a telephone call. So we mention the telephone number, and then automatically a connection is created between your number and the receiver's number. Same way the link can be created, and a link is established exactly with one pair, a sender and a receiver, and a single line will be shared by that particular pair till their completion of the transmission. It can be either unidirectional or bidirectional, but generally it is bidirectional. That is, both of them can send and receive seamlessly using the same link. Another option is it can be either synchronous or asynchronous. We will see the drawbacks of asynchronous communication, especially among concurrent processes which have to share some resource. So when there is a shared resource, the asynchronous processes may get into a lot of trouble. We will explore the various problems that could result in when the communication among concurrent processes is not synchronized. What will happen? We will explore that in later. So we have the options of synchronous and asynchronous, but the drawback of synchronous is that it will add some delay into the communication, because it's like having a lot of speed breakers. So when there are speed breakers, too many speed breakers, though there is an advantage, it will also slow down the movement of the traffic. In the same way, this synchronous transmission will restrict the speed of transmission, but it will avoid the accidents or collisions among the concurrent processes. So in that case, what we do is that the send and receive primitives are defined with the with the process IDs of the sender and receiver. So in the case of asynchronous, what happens is that only the sender names the recipient, and the recipient is not required to name the sender. So the recipient is open to any sender. It's just waiting for, it is just going to accept a message from someone. Whereas if it is synchronous, then this sender will only send a message to that particular receiver, and that receiver will only expect a message and accept a message from a particular receiver. Then they are tightly bound. Then that communication is classified as symmetry. Whereas if the receiver is not fixed to any sender, then it is described as asymmetry. Another option is indirect communication. We so far seen about indirect communication where the addresses are mentioned in the messages. If you remove the addresses of the sender and receiver, then what we call as a indirect communication is introduced. But then how do you transmit a message without any address? Just like we do with in the case of the emails. So what we generally when you in the old days, if I have to communicate some information to a relative or a friend, we used to write the letters. So we used to write a letter on the postcard, and then we will fill the address of the actual postal address of the receiver in the post box. Then only it will be delivered to the destination. So if I don't know the actual address of the other person, then I can't send any letter to him. Though I may know his other general details, I may know his name, okay, but I also need to know his precise postal address. Only then it is possible to communicate. That is similar to the direct communication. You should know the process ID of the address of the receiver. In direct communication, it's equivalent to email sending. See, every day we send mails to lot of people. We don't even know where those people are residing, in which country they are living, where they are, what is their address, anything, no detail is need to be known. We send, for example, mails to customer care. So the mails are simply delivered to a common mailbox somewhere in the world, and it's retrieved by the actual recipient. That is the idea of indirect communication. So mailboxes are created and they are shared by the sender and receiver for their communication. Each mailbox will have a unique ID, and the processes can communicate only by sharing the mailbox. And here the properties of communication link are: links are established only if processes share a common mailbox. See, here the communication is not between process to process, but it is only between process to a mailbox, which means you don't need to know the PID of the sender or the receiver. And a link may be associated with many processes. Now it's no longer one-to-one. Many can send and receive with the same mailbox simultaneously. So it's now going to be accommodating multiple processes in the communication. And each pair of processes may share several communication links. Say, for example, there are many mailboxes. So one process may be sending messages to multiple mailboxes. So it will have link to all the mailboxes that it either sends or receives. And here also the link can be unidirectional or bidirectional, but most probably it will be a bidirectional communication. And here the operations are: create a mailbox, send and receive messages through the mailbox, and once the task is over, it can be destroyed. So here this is the primitive of the function. Send A, and A here represents the address of the mailbox, not the address of the process. Now we may have some conflicts arising in the second indirect communication when you share the mailbox. For example, three processes share a mailbox called A, and suddenly P1 sends a message. Now the question is that who should receive it, whether it should be P2 or P3, because we no longer mention the address in the mail. It's only the mailbox ID. So which means the mailbox ID is common to many processes. So how do you identify which one of the recipient has to get the message? If the situation is like a message has to be sent to all the recipients, then it's not a difficult thing, because it's a kind of broadcasting. So that there is no intended recipient. it has to be delivered to everybody. But what if the message has to be specifically delivered to one of them? We have some possible solutions. One is allow a link to be associated with at most two processes. That means the mailbox itself will be confined to two processes alone. Option 1. Allow only one process at a time to execute the receive operation. So if P2 executes the receive operation, it will receive the message and the message will be removed from the mailbox. Whereas if P3 executes receive, then it will receive the message and the message will be removed. Only one of them will be able to receive the message. Thirdly, allow the system to select arbitrarily the receiver. So the sender is not going to determine who should receive. It is a system which will determine who is going to get, and the sender will be notified of the receiver who happened to receive the message. Now synchronization, as we had seen, message passing having the advantage of synchronization is inherent. It is inbuilt in the implementation. It is by enforcing either blocking or non-blocking message passing. So if synchronization is necessary, then we must implement blocking message passing. If synchronization is not necessary for our purpose, we can implement that as using non-blocking synchronization. So blocking is considered synchronous because when you implement blocking send, the sender is blocked until the message is delivered. He can't do anything else, or he can't proceed to some other activity until he gets an acknowledgement that the message was delivered. In the same way, blocking receive means that the receiver is blocked until the message is received by the receiver. So by this way we can restrict that the communication only happens between one sender and receive, and no other process is going to intervene or interfere in their communication until this task is completed. So non-blocking is the opposite of the blocking, and it is asynchronous. So the meaning of the non-blocking is can be easily understood. Sender sends a message and he is free, and receiver need not have to wait for until the message is received. And we can also combine like blocking send, non-blocking receive, non-blocking send, blocking receive. That is also possible. And once you implement the blocking based primitive, then producer consumer problem becomes a very simple solution, because the issue of conflict, that is when producer is filling the buffer, consumer should not access the buffer. Similarly, when the consumer is already consuming from the buffer, producer should not attempt to fill data into the buffer. So this needs to be tackled. We did not have an answer in shared memory, but now we can say that we can implement that using blocking or non-blocking. So when one process, either producer or consumer, is already handling the buffer, he will invoke the blocked send, and the buffer will only allow that communication. And similarly, the consumer can also invoke the blocked receive to overcome the conflict. So when the consumer invokes the receive, it blocks until a message is available. Now the next option we have is buffering. So whether communication is direct or indirect, somehow the messages have to be stored. So they have to be queued in a temporary queue. Such queues can be implemented in three ways. One is the queue has a maximum length of 0. Thus the link cannot have any messages waiting in it. In other words, no queue is provided. So the messages have to be immediately thrown out of the system and they have to go to the destination. So no buffering is provided. Second is, in this case the sender must block until the recipient receives the message, because there is no buffering. See, if there is a buffer, now the advantage is that the sender can send the message to the buffer and he can be relieved from that task and he can do some other activity, because the buffer will hold the message until it reaches the destination successfully. Because if the message is lost in transition, during transmission, if the message is lost and if the sender has moved on, then there is no way to generate the same data. But if it is in the buffer, it can be retransmitted with the help of the buffer. And the next better solution is bounded capacity. So we provide an array. In that array we will keep the buffers, and what if the buffer capacity is full, that is you have queued multiple messages and you no longer can put any more message. So we can overcome that using some kind of technique, so that the messages of the least priority can be removed, or the oldest message can be removed, a first in first out. So some strategy can be employed. Another option is unbounded. So we implement the buffer using a kind of linked list structure where it never gets filled, infinite capacity. So finally, as we are completing the topic of interprocess communication, you should be capable of answering these questions precisely. What are concurrent processes? How do you categorize concurrent processes, and what causes the presence of or the execution of concurrent processes? What are the reasons for their communication? Why concurrent processes need to communicate? What do they achieve by their communication? And what are the methods of facilitating their communication? And the differences between the shared memory and message passing, and how do you choose which method in a given situation, on what basis the selection should be made, and a solution, how do you solve the producer consumer problem using shared memory and using message passing, and the various design options or issues we had for the message passing, like whether we should go for direct or indirect, synchronous or asynchronous. So that those are all various design issues. And finally, the implementation of shared memory and message passing through programs, and the system calls are the library functions available for the implementation of shared memory and the message passing. So you should be by now, based on our discussions, you would have got answers for each one of these questions, and make sure that you can elaborately explain any one of these questions if it is asked you. Thank you.